like Matt said, you know, I work here in town at Presnell Gage. I'm a CPA. Been fielding a lot of questions regarding this, the new Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit Program. Still some unknowns. You know, a lot of these new tax programs, it really takes a full year before things get challenged and we get better guidance on what things look like for, you know, years 2 through 10 down the road and all that. So bear with me. I'm going to try my best to answer all your questions. I may not have answers for all of them, but we'll dive in here and go over the most important stuff to look out for. So, like I said, new program. The state set aside $50 million for each year to go towards families that are paying for non-public school options. So it is only available for full-time Idaho residents. You would have to be a full-time Idaho resident for all of 2024 to qualify. So if you moved here late 2023 or early 2024, I encourage you to look at your Idaho individual tax return, and on the first page there will be a box that shows if you are a part-year resident or a full-year resident. If the part-year resident box is checked, you will likely not qualify because that's what Idaho will be going off of to determine full-year residency. Part of this being a new program, you know, most of the time tax benefits for a year line up with your income for the year and your status during that year. This year is a little bit odd in that we're going to be using 2024 income, 2024 residency status to determine a 2025 benefit tax credit. So when we get to the income part, it won't be your 2025 income, it'll be your 2024 income. Eligible K through 12 students up to 21 for those who have a qualifying disability. It's a refundable tax credit. What that means is that if you file your Idaho tax return and you only have $2,000 tax due, but you spent $5,000 on tuition for one child, you will get $5,000 back, even though you only had $2,000 credit. That's the best type of tax credit you can get. Non-refundable tax credit would only be up to the amount of taxes that you owed for the year. So in that example, you would have only gotten $2,000 instead of the full $5,000. $7,500 up for each eligible student with a qualifying disability. So the key important stuff I've tried to put in brackets here in red. The state can only put $50 million to this program. They must give priority to families whose household income is less than 300% of the federal poverty line limit. We have some pamphlets in the back. They might have gotten moved or they're all gone. Okay, there's a few left. It will show your household size and the income limit to get to that 300% to give a quick reference to where you're at. Again, this is for 2024 income, so there's not much you can do now to get in that priority bucket by reducing your income. But those who are in the priority bucket, underneath that income threshold, the state is required to give those families priority going forward. The idea behind that is some stability with putting kids into schools. If you get the credit one year to allow your kids to go there, they don't want you to not get the credit next year because you made an extra $5,000 and then you got to pull your kids out or be struck with a big burden. So if your income is close to that range, and we added another 10% there to help you gauge, if you're within that, you're right on the bubble, there may be some steps you can take for 2025 to get into the priority bucket for the 2026 credit going forward. So keep that in mind. If you're within that range, you can talk to myself, any other financial professional on ways to reduce your income. If you're a business owner, self-employed, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. If you W-2 employee, at this stage in the game, there's probably not much other than increasing more of your retirement accounts for a year. the applications will give priority to a first come, first served basis. So within the group that's their income's below 300%, they're gonna get the priority. Within that group, it'll be on first come, first served basis. We've never done this before, but doing some back of the napkin math, we suspect that there will be lots of money left over after the priority group gets their money first. Because most families that, go to private school, are in the higher income limit, or if they're not, they're getting some tuition assistance. And if you're getting tuition assistance, you can't double dip. So you can't get the assistance and then also get the credit and come out ahead of it. Those families who are homeschooling, there's less of those. Some, it's usually cheaper than going to a private school where you have facility costs and administrative costs. So those people who are sending in expenses for that probably isn't gonna be a lot to be reimbursed for. So if you are under the 300% line, it's very likely that we think that you'll get a full reimbursement for the cost that you incur, up to $5,000 per child. The second bucket, if you are over the 300% line, the cost of private tuition, times the amount of kids in high school who are in private school far exceeds 50 million. The state will likely run out of money, and that's where it becomes very, very important to file as soon as you can and apply as soon as you can to get that. You will likely get a all or nothing award for this grant because it's first come, first served. So you will get a letter that you get all the money that you requested for or none. Once they run out, everyone else gets zero. So some key deadlines here. November 1st, we've already passed it, but that's not a tough deadline. By then you should have filed your 2024 Form 40. That's just your Idaho individual income tax return that I'm sure everyone here filed in the spring, if not by October 15th. So if you filed, you're completely taken care of. If you didn't file, if you're late, we've missed the deadline for this credit, but I imagine all you guys have met that. December 1st, this is the key next deadline that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. You have to create a taxpayer access account through the Idaho website. When you get there, there will be a same-day verification of who you are option, which that's the option that you're going to choose because otherwise you got to wait like 10 to 14 business days to get a letter from the state, and we're past that. To do the same-day verification, you're going to need a copy of your 2024 state income tax return. So if you guys have filed on TurboTax, when we get clients from TurboTax, sometimes it's a challenge to get a copy of your tax return from your TurboTax account. I would really encourage you to start looking into that ASAP because it might take a couple phone calls to customer support to get your things. And you want that in plenty of time to register with the state. If there's going to be a total tax that you owe to Idaho that they're going to ask you to put in to make sure that you are who you say you are. So here's another expanded timeline. January 15th is when the first day you can apply. If you're within that priority bucket, it's less importance to apply right away because it's more than likely you'll get your money based off of your income. If I'm in that bucket, I probably still file within a few days, apply within a few days, just to be on the safe side. But if I'm over that income amount, I'm logging in 11 p.m. Pacific time, January 14th to file. Would it put it past the state of Idaho that their website crashes? If that's the case. just early in the morning, get back on there. So what you can do right now to prepare is tallying up your expenses. I imagine most of you guys here, send your kids to Logos. Ask for a statement of all the tuition costs and school costs that you paid throughout the year. If you don't have that, try to get your ducks in a row. If you're over $5,000 per child, then you know you're going to be covered. You just take $5,000 or $7,500 if you have a disabled child, and be ready to enter that number when you apply. That number is going to be tied to your tax return, and you're going to have receipts filed with your tax return that support that number, which is also very unusual. It's very rare that you actually have to send receipts with your tax return to the feds or the state. So April 15th, that's when you'll get the letters come in the mail. Again, expect either you're going to get all the money you asked for or probably zero. Later on in the summer of 2026, those who are in the priority bucket will receive an advance payment to go towards their 2026 tuition costs, which will then get reconciled on your 2026 tax return that you file in the spring of 2027. But this advance the idea is to help cash flow the cost of tuition for families that need it more than others. So we talked about being an Idaho resident, where to look on your 2024 tax return if you feel like you might not have communicated that well to Idaho. Qualified expenses, tuition here at Logos, that's qualified expense. These are more important when you are homeschooling. There is some interpretation that all the 4 key subjects need to be provided by the same vendor in order for that cost to be eligible, as opposed to buying 2 from one vendor and another 2 from a different vendor that are better in science and social studies. But it's most likely that once we get through a year and that gets challenged and we get better guidance, that I imagine it's going to be eligible. Doesn't make sense that it won't be eligible. So, example of qualified expenses. That transportation cost, if you're not up to $5,000 per child, you could take the IRS mileage rate and multiply that from the distance from your house to school if you are driving your kids and picking them up from school, times the number of school days that you do. You put that on a Excel spreadsheet, you print it off as part of your receipt. That's probably going to be good enough for Idaho. But the more detailed explanations and documentations you can have, the better it's going to be for Idaho. I wouldn't just write a note that Idaho owes you $1,000 for transportation. Probably won't fly. So materials, textbooks, all that qualifies. Start gathering your receipts for 2025 expenses. One question that was asked in the previous talk that I did is, what if you paid tuition costs in 2025 that were for a 2024 academic year, or you paid for a 2026 academic year in 2025? Individuals are primarily cash basis taxpayers, so what that means is that you recognize expenses and income when you receive cash or when you pay cash checks. So it's our current interpretation that if you paid for a 2024 academic year in 2025, that counts as a 2025 expense that can be reimbursed for this credit. If you are short and you want to prepay the second semester of 2025, well, I guess in winter of 2026, in December, this month, next month, to get to the 5,000, I would do that. So you don't leave any money on the table for a year. So this is just reiterating what all the 4 core subjects are at a minimum. These are slides that the state of Idaho put together when they were generating awareness on it. So if you don't qualify, state of Idaho could get after you, ask for the money back plus penalty and interest in, you know, felony charges if things get really bad. I doubt that ever happens. But, non-school, private school, you know, obviously Logos qualifies for that. One key part is that if your child is even part-time enrolled in a public school, it may not be the case for most of you here, but even if they take one class at a public school, they will not qualify. They have to be completely enrolled in a non-public school, no public school enrollment, no matter the degree. So yeah, not much information on these ones. We've already passed that deadline. If you didn't have to file a tax return in 2024. So TAP registration, this is showing the bubble where you want to click to take the quiz for the same day access. Again, you'll need a copy of your 2024 Idaho tax return available. It'll tell you what line to pull a number from. Again, if you don't have that, get going on getting a copy of it ASAP, because we have until December 1st, and you don't want their website crashing on November 30th for that as well. So I think this will cover most of them. No limit on how many kids you have. We're not worried about that. Idaho 529 plans. If you pay your tuition from Idaho 529, you can double dip in a sense that you can use that money for tuition, avoid paying taxes or penalties for that, and then also use that to get your credit back from Idaho. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open up the floor. If anyone has any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Our qualified expenses, do they include non-mandatory fees for things like athletics or choir and drama and stuff like that that are part of the school experience but not tuition per se? Lunch programs, etc.
I want to see here if they mention that. You know, if it's some fees for class, I imagine that they would qualify for. If it's extracurriculars, sports, I don't think it'd be unreasonable to ask for it, including them if you're not at the $5,000 limit. If you're over $5,000, it's irrelevant with the tuition stuff. But I could also see the Idaho saying, no, that's an elective, that's a non-educational core things.
There's no actual definitive word on that yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Good
give it a shot.
question. Yeah.
So moved here from Indiana in 2024. So this doesn't apply to us at all until next year.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah.
So if you have one child that is taking one class in the public school, but your other child is fully enrolled full-time, how does that differentiate? Does it just qualify you in total or just in part?
Per child decision. So if you have one child, 100% in private, no public, their costs would qualify. If you have another child that's on the fence, you know, then they would not be eligible at all for any expenses.
family has tuition assistance, is there a way where they could pay on top, above and beyond that to reach that $5,000 limit?
So with the tuition assistance, you can't double dip on that. So if the,
Not double dipping, but being able to get the school the full, you know, let's say a family's paying $4,000 with tuition assistance, and they wanna be able to give, you know, get the full $5,000 to the school.
yeah. My guess with that wouldn't work, cause you'd have to submit your receipt. Your receipt or your invoices, your expenses would likely show the true cost to the family after the tuition assistance. And if the family said, well, yeah, it cost us $1,000, but we're gonna pay $5 to get to the school to get $5 back, and then we'll be ahead by $4 or give $4 to the school, I imagine they'd say, that's not, yeah. I imagine if this, you know, this program is being challenged, in the courts, if it survives and has a long, you know, future to it, the tuition assistance schools are gonna probably rethink that whole structure, you know,
Yeah.
to keep resources.
And is there anything that, like how the schools have their pricing structure set, can they still make adjustments? Cause like even the way the discounts are done, kind of like the last kids, if you have a big family, the last kids get a huge tuition discount. And but your first few are paying over $5.
Yeah, if you have an invoice from the school supporting the costs for the kids that you pay, that's gonna get you right.
That's the
So
key.
if between now and then, if there's a change in how a school or someone is being charged, you know, they missed a fee or a tuition or whatever, then I'm sure that would work. Yeah.
What counts as part-time kindergarten?
Part-time kindergarten, don't know the exact definition of that. I'm sure that will also be defined better, but, I imagine it's, you know, you go there for half a day or probably any time that if there's any hour that you're at kindergarten, that's considered part-time. Yeah.
I think you already said this, but just to be extra clear, if you receive any tuition assistance, you're disqualified. Or is it if you receive tuition assistance that brings you down to below $5,000 a year?
Below the $5,000.
So if you receive tuition assistance, but you're still paying more than $5,000 a year, you're qualified, or you can apply for this.
Correct, that's my understanding.
You don't have to ask for the full 5, like if you get RTP and it only costs 2, then you just ask for 2, I think, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Like
yeah.
just 5 is your cap,
Right, so you can ask up to 5.
up to 5.
As long as you're not paying more,
And that's-
or as long as you're paying more than 5 in tuition, you can ask up to 5.
Yes, yeah, yep,
Got it.
yep. Per child.
Per child. So it's any, just because you're receiving tuition assistance doesn't mean you're disqualified.
Correct.
Got it.
Out-of-pocket costs.
They want you to have lots of kids.
Is it a per child, I guess this is kind of going back to transcription, per child expense, or what if you're paying $7,000 for one and $3,000 for the other? I think when I read that introduced to the legislature, it was like, well, you'll get $10,000 because you have 2 kids, but is that not true? We get capped at 5 for one and 3 for the other? Don't know.
Don't know for sure. What would help in that case is if you don't submit an invoice that shows per child. Just say $10,000 for 2 kids, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't make it easy for them.
But, yeah, that very well could be their intent. So there's the intent of the lawmakers, then it goes to the Idaho State Tax Commission to try to fulfill the lawmakers' intent, and sometimes they get away from the intent. So it could be that the state tax commission misinterprets that intent and does do per child. So if you submit an invoice $3,000 for this kid, they're gonna limit it to that kid of $3,000. That could happen. If they challenge it on that, I don't foresee harsh penalties and interest, you know, this is new to everyone.
What if you have a senior this year? How is that gonna affect what you get paid for next year?
For next year,
If you have a senior this year.
graduates in spring 26.
Do you just not submit him at all, or the receipts from him?
Well, let's see. So the age limit 21 for those with disabilities, it's K through 12 students, so if he's a senior, he'd be 12, so he likely qualify for 25 as well as for 26. Yeah, you guys will qualify for that tuition cost, so if you're gonna be over $5,000 limit, but you only have one semester to pay for in 2026, I defer the payment until 2026 to try to get more, max out that year. This year's already maxed out.
So when you talk about receipts, do you mean, like, can we submit invoices that don't say paid, or do they have to say paid? Does it, like, are they really picky about invoices versus receipts?
I wouldn't worry about marked paid or not paid. It'd be nice if it was showing that it was paid, but anything that supports your cost is good enough. You won't have to submit bank statements showing that you actually paid it. It's just more of expenses, invoices that show that you owed that money, and if they have more questions, I'm sure they'll ask for proof of payment, but you know, if it was me, I probably wouldn't be worried about submitting the paid part, but you would be in a stronger position if you did submit an invoice that said that it was paid, and the date that it was paid, yeah.
Do you have to mail these receipts in, or?
They're gonna be attached to your Idaho tax return, so if you,
You're not under electronic, you'll have to do.
well, 99% of it's probably e-file, so you're gonna have to upload those PDFs of the receipts to your Idaho tax return to get it going. So with the letters coming out around April 15th, it's likely that you'll either have to extend your tax return to wait to hear word of what you got, or you can file and then amend later to report the credit and the expenses on your personal tax return. If it was me, I would just extend, make sure you have all your taxes paid up. There's no penalties or interest to wait to file after April 15th, as long as you have the taxes that you owe paid in. So if you think you might owe $500, pay $1,000 just to be safe. You file it later, 2 weeks later, you're gonna get the money back anyways as a refund. Yeah.
So in terms of like being ready to file or apply January 15th, what all do you think you should have ready? The receipts, is there other documents that you should have?
You don't have to have the receipts all buttoned up, but you should have the number that you're gonna put in. So if you're way over $5,000 and you know that with confidence, it's easy. It's $5,000 per kid when you apply. If you think you're on the bubble, I just total up the receipts now, get them all nice, neat and older, neat and order and folder. And if it's $4,156, you type that in so it lines up with your tax return. I wouldn't overestimate your expenses, because with this program running out of money, you know, it could be that the state frowns upon that you're reserving money that you will not get when you actually submit the receipts on it. But if you are in the priority bucket And no one's applied, but if it asks for your expenses that you expect to pay in 2026, there I would be a little bit generous, because we're talking in the future is always an estimate. You can be high on an estimate to try to reserve as much money as you can now to pay the bills. And then that'll get reconciled on your return later, but right now, we're looking at what's happened in the past, so there's less grace if you're overestimating how much you'll actually get, when you could come up with a number.
You kind of touched on it, but just for those of us that pay monthly, so I'm paying, January 2025 for the 24-25 school year, I would just consider that through payments through this December as my 2025 school year costs.
Yep, so yeah, cost not on academic year, but on calendar year, what you paid.
But this is all about 2024.
We're using 2024 income and residency status to determine,
But about
What?
the payments of 25?
correct, yep. Any others?
If we were part of the, no, that's the same thing. They keep changing the names, the online programs that we submitted assignments, like group of stuff, and then we would get like $8 per semester for kids. Blanking right now, but it's all.
Another
Tech Trust?
scholarship.
Yes, thank you, Tech Trap, and then it changed names, Braintree and things like that. If we were in that in the spring, before we even knew about this tax credit thing, are we disqualified? Cause we decided not to re-enroll in it because we didn't wanna disqualify ourselves.
So your kids were homeschooled?
We were coming here to Logos, but it was supplementary, if we were either in private school or homeschool, you could apply for the program and then you submit assignments, and you work with the teacher and stuff.
Logos assignments, they did not assign assignments.
Right, yeah. And then they give
Yep.
you money towards things.
I would, if it was me, I'd put the net cost that you paid for those programs.
We didn't, they give us,
Okay,
grant money, or whatever you call it. That's not, it's different from the unparent parents grant money.
okay. So any grants you get, I'd subtract that from the out-of-pocket costs you paid to Logos. So if they gave you a grant for $1,000 and you paid $4,000 in tuition costs, you
But
claim $3,000.
Well, one of my questions is, it was considered a public school program, did they give us money towards things, that were school related? Not,
Yeah.
it didn't cover tuition, it would cover, like cost for books or, like sports fees, some equipment things for sports. But it was very limited, some of the things that we could expense for. Does that make sense? Like, are you familiar with those programs? I'm trying to remember the one that we were in, because there were several different ones. Yeah, it was like Braintree and Tech Trap and,
No, I'm not familiar with those ones. They do have an example with Idaho Home Learning Academy and Idaho Virtual Academy. I believe those are public school funded programs, so those won't qualify, but I don't know for sure. Those grants. Yeah, with it being a gray area, I would still submit the cost that you're out of, the intent of this is to make private schooling more affordable. They just don't want you to be taking advantage of public and private, but it's within these gray areas, I would err on the side to your benefit.
yeah, cause it wasn't even, something that had passed by this point. It was, before, like in the spring was the last time we were a part of it. And then it passed after we were done with it, and we didn't re-enroll knowing that 25, that's why I didn't know if it counted, but.
Maybe if you go on their website and see, you know, try to find out if it's, you know, sourced by public funds and considered kind of a public school option, if there's that phrasing in places then probably lead to your kids won't qualify for the year. But if it doesn't have that, then I'd try to still keep your kids qualified.
Is there a, when we submit the taxes, is there a receipt that we can get from Gosh on all our payments for that year?
Yeah, I imagine if you contact, the county department, you know, billing, that they'll be able to get you a statement showing what you paid through December.
When do we have to submit the receipts?
Yep, with your tax returns.
On April 15th.
On April 15th, yeah, whenever you file.
Sign up
Yep,
January 15th.
yep.
Number.
That's good. Jason, thank you very much.